A famous royal biographer has just dropped a claim so explosive that it is sending shockwaves through every corner of the royal world. Not because it targets Meghan, not because it attacks the monarchy, but because it points directly at Prince Harry himself. According to this account, Harry didn't lose everything overnight. He surrendered it piece by piece, one decision at a time, until one day he looked around and realized the world he once belonged to was no longer there. And the most chilling part? Nobody forced him. Nobody dragged him away. He walked willingly into a future that may now be unraveling before his eyes.
Race, I mean, they've got a great story about why they left the royal family. There are lots of lies about what happened.
He immediately gets the retaliation in, and this is really all just part of the battle. And said that he'd never spoken to me and had no idea when he did speak to me.
There'd been the Netflix series, Harry's book was about to come out, she was about to launch herself as a domestic goddess.
Lining anger between both sides can't be removed. And of course, the news today that Harry is...
A documentary series to promote the Sussexes.
When you're as rankly hypocritical as Harry...
Pose in there and stay in the Invictus Games that Harry was running out there in 2018.
There are a few people who were sympathetic to her, and obviously I spoke to her father, who loves her still very much. They're not proper royals, and they silenced them. If congressmen and senators didn't take her call, this is the Duchess of Sussex.
For years, people have argued over who changed whom. Was Meghan the driving force? Was Harry already searching for an escape? Was the palace too rigid? Was the media too relentless? But now a different theory is emerging, one that makes this story even more uncomfortable. Because if Harry knowingly traded his old life for a new one, then every loss that followed becomes impossible to ignore. The man making these claims is Tom Bauer, a biographer whose reputation alone makes people stop and listen. He has spent years digging into powerful figures, exposing details others never dare touch. And now he is turning his attention toward the relationship that changed the course of modern royal history. His argument is not subtle. He believes the warning signs appeared far earlier than anyone realized, long before the interviews, long before the accusations, long before California. The clues were already there, and according to those close to the story, everything traces back to one seemingly ordinary weekend. At first glance, it was nothing special, just another gathering among friends, the kind of private royal adjacent event that never makes headlines, the kind of weekend nobody outside the inner circle even notices. Yet years later, many are looking back at that exact moment and wondering whether it was the first crack in a foundation that would eventually collapse.
Yeah. So I don't think her exit would be smooth.
Okay. Well, speaking of breakups, what's going on between them and...
The unsettling question hanging over everything is simple. Why would a prince who already possessed global recognition, wealth, privilege, and public affection risk all of it? Harry already had what millions spend their lives chasing: fame, influence, history A place within one of the most famous families on earth. Yet somehow none of it seemed enough. According to Bauer's account, when Meghan entered Harry's world, two completely different visions of life collided. One world was rooted in centuries of tradition, loyalty, and established relationships. The other was ambitious, modern, independent, and unwilling to bend easily. The collision wasn't loud at first. It was subtle, almost invisible. But once it began, it never stopped. Then came the weekend that so many insiders now view as a turning point.
Huge ambition and total ruthlessness on her terms. But she is a woman without much.
Sandringham, a quiet shooting weekend. Old friends, familiar faces, lifelong bonds. The people gathered there were not impressed by titles. They knew Harry before the cameras, before the speeches, before the global attention. They knew the real Harry, or at least they thought they did. What happened next would become the subject of endless private conversations. According to accounts cited by Bauer, Meghan immediately stood out, not because she blended in, but because she refused to. Where others saw harmless jokes among old friends, she reportedly saw attitudes she felt needed challenging. Where others expected relaxed banter, she reportedly pushed back, corrected, questioned, confronted. To some observers, that sounds admirable. To others, it sounded like disaster. The atmosphere shifted. Conversations became tense. The easy familiarity that had defined these gatherings suddenly felt strained. People who had spent years laughing together found themselves second-guessing every word. And when the weekend ended, the discussions didn't stop. Messages messages reportedly circulated afterward. Friends comparing impressions, friends asking questions, friends expressing disbelief. One word allegedly surfaced repeatedly: nuts. Not directed at Meghan, directed at Harry, because the people who believed they knew him best were struggling to understand what they had just witnessed. The woman entering Harry's life didn't appear interested in becoming part of his existing world. Instead, many felt she expected that world to change around her. And what makes this moment so fascinating is what happened afterward. The concerns did not fade. The awkwardness did not disappear. The doubts only grew stronger. What seemed like an uncomfortable weekend soon began looking like a preview of something much bigger, something that would eventually reshape friendships, family relationships, and perhaps even Harry's entire identity. The real shock wasn't what happened during that Sandringham weekend. The real shock was what happened afterward, because according to accounts surrounding the story, the uneasy feeling Harry's friends carried home with them never disappeared. In fact, it only seemed to grow stronger as the months rolled forward. Then came the wedding preparations, and suddenly, people who had been part of Harry's life for decades started noticing something strange. Faces that had once been constants in his world were no longer standing close to him. Lifelong friendships appeared to be fading with astonishing speed. What looked like a minor social disagreement at first now felt like the opening chapter of a much larger transformation. One by one, people who had known Harry since his younger years reportedly found themselves pushed further from the center of his life. These were not casual acquaintances. These were individuals who had witnessed his happiest moments and darkest struggles. People who knew the man behind the title. Yet somehow that entire circle seemed to vanish from the picture almost overnight. To royal watchers, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The old Harry appeared to be disappearing along with the people who once surrounded him. Then came a detail so small that many people initially overlooked it. Harry reportedly changed his phone number and failed to provide it directly to key members of his family. On the surface, it sounds insignificant. Millions of people change numbers every year. But when viewed alongside everything else, it suddenly becomes symbolic. A disconnected phone line became a metaphor for disconnected relationships, a silence where conversation once existed, a gap where trust once lived.
And Harry didn't take the advice because Harry was caught. He was determined to marry Meghan.
As the distance grew, concerns reportedly intensified inside royal circles. Conversations that once centered on wedding plans and future hopes reportedly shifted toward worries about Harry himself. Some family members allegedly feared they were watching a completely different person emerge. The brother who had once shared everything with William now seemed increasingly isolated from him. The bond that had survived childhood trauma, relentless public attention, and decades of scrutiny appeared to be weakening under pressure nobody fully understood. According to accounts referenced in the story, attempts to raise concerns only created more conflict. Warnings were dismissed. Questions were interpreted as attacks. Reconciliation meetings reportedly produced more tension than resolution. Every effort to close the widening gap seemed to make it wider instead. And while these family battles unfolded behind palace walls, another storm was building outside them. Harry and Meghan's post-royal future had been marketed as a fresh beginning. Independence, freedom, opportunity, a chance to thrive without restrictions. But according to critics, the results have been far more complicated than anyone expected. Projects that once appeared unstoppable struggled to maintain momentum. Business ventures faced growing scrutiny. Public support became increasingly divided. Every setback added another layer to an already difficult situation. What makes the story so emotionally charged is that every disappointment seemed to raise the same haunting question. Was it worth it? Was the sacrifice justified? Harry had walked away from a life most people could never imagine. A royal role, a historical legacy, lifelong friendships, family connections. Yet years later, many observers believe he appears more uncertain than ever. Now, whispers of tension inside the marriage itself have added a new layer of intrigue. Some insiders claim the couple are increasingly pursuing separate paths. Others insist these reports are exaggerated and that every marriage experiences challenges. The truth remains hidden behind closed doors. But even the existence of these rumors fuels speculation that something fundamental has changed. Perhaps the most fascinating part of the entire story is the growing discussion about regret. Not public regret, not dramatic confessions. Quiet regret. the kind that reveals itself in private reflections and unanswered questions, the kind that emerges when someone begins looking backward instead of forward. Because according to this narrative, Harry may finally be confronting the true cost of every decision he made. Not just the loss of status, not just the loss of opportunities, but the loss of relationships that once defined who he was. A brother, friends, a sense of belonging, a connection to the world that shaped him. And that is what makes this story so compelling. It isn't simply a royal scandal. It's a story about choices, about consequences, about whether a person can ever truly recover what has been left behind. Because as more voices speculate about reconciliation, one uncomfortable question continues to hang over everything. If Harry suddenly wanted his old life back, would there still be a door waiting for him to walk through? Or has that door already closed forever?